One huge upset, another pretty big upset, a lot of planting of flags. It was a great weekend for rivals to battle each other, trying to get into the college football playoff. I'm going to do it a little different this week. No reason to do a top 25 because now we're down to the conference championships, and I'm just going to predict the college football playoff in my eyes, and that includes who's going to win the conference championships and how I think the bracket will look after it is done. Now, next week, I will just, after it's done, I will predict who I think will win throughout the bracket. But this week is purely on how I think the bracket's going to end up. So let's get to my predictions. And I'm actually going to do this a little different. I'm going to start with the 1 through 4 and then work my way through the bracket all the way to number 12. But I'm actually going to do it in opposite order. I'm going to go through 1 through 12 instead of 12 through 1 because I think some of the number 1 to me is an easier pick. Let's start with the number 1 team. For me, Oregon's going to be playing Penn State for the Big Ten championship. I do not see, you know how I felt all year long about Penn State. I just don't see how Penn State can beat Oregon. So I'm going to have, in the top left-hand corner, we're going to start with Oregon as your number 1 seed. Moving on to your 2 seed, I think the 2 seed, based on the rankings, will be between the winner of Texas and Georgia, your SEC winner. I think it's very hard to beat a team twice. And on a neutral field, I know that Georgia went out and beat Texas in Austin. But for the SEC championship, I'm going to go against my dogs. And I believe Texas is going to come out and find a way to beat Georgia. Just because Georgia's been so inconsistent, you don't know which Georgia team you're going to get. And I believe that if they play Manning like they did last night against Texas A&M, Georgia cannot guard against a running quarterback. They might can feast on Ewers, but I believe Texas is going to win the SEC championship, and they will be your 2 seed. Moving to the 3 seed, this is where one of the big upsets is affecting the CFP. Miami got upset by Syracuse yesterday, which puts Clemson in the ACC championship. But I think the winner of the ACC championship is going to be SMU, and they are actually going to be higher ranked than Boise State, and they're going to get that 3 seed for winning the ACC. Well, I gave away my 4 seed just now by saying that I think that SMU will be over Boise State, and I think that is correct. Boise State plays UNLV Friday night, and I believe Boise State will win the Mountain West, and they will be higher ranked than whoever wins the Big 12. So right now, I would pick Boise State to be the last bye for that 4 seed. Now we get into the non-conference winners, except for one. But this would be the highest ranked team that is not won their conference. Well, this team is not in a conference, and I think that's why they're going to fall at number 5, and that is Notre Dame. So I have Notre Dame falling into the 5 seed with the possibility of winning their game to go on to play Boise State. So who's going to get the 6 seed? I actually have a theory on this. I believe they're going to give the conference champion losers who have been ranked high a shot at getting a home game. And after losing to Oregon, I'm only going to have Penn State fall a few spots. Maybe only 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, depends on how they rank them. I think Penn State could be as high as 3, Texas number 2. But they would only fall 2 or 3 spots because they're not going to punish them for going to the championship game. And they're going to give them a shot at having a home game. So Penn State is your 6th seed. Moving on to your 7th seed, and it's going to coincide with the 6th seed. I think another loser of a conference championship, they're not going to punish them, so to speak, and still give them a shot at playing a home game because they were ranked in the top 5 going into the conference championship. And with that being said, I'm going to have Georgia as the 7th seed. And I know people are going to say, well, that's 3 losses for them. They should fall further. I don't think so. I don't think they're going to count that against the teams that are ranked so much higher. I think they're still going to have a CFP spot because they've already said that they grade someone going into a championship game much higher. So that's why I'm going to have Penn State and Georgia getting the 6 and 7 seed. So who gets that last coveted home game for the college football playoff? Well, I believe it's going to be the last remaining champion of a conference. And I believe Arizona State is going to beat Iowa State for the Big 12 championship, and they're going to get that coveted last home game in the first round as the 8th seed. And I believe that the Big 12 championship is actually going to be a really close game, but Arizona runs the ball so well. Iowa State has problems guarding the run, so that's why I would have them winning the Big 12. Okay, for the 9 seed, who is going to travel out to Tempe and play the now Big 12 champions, the Sun Devils of Arizona State? The big upset yesterday, do not plant a flag on there, the Ohio State Buckeyes, I think, will travel out. They'll get the 9 seed after all the conference championships are completed, and they will go out there to play the Big 12 champions. By the way, while we're talking about Ohio State, if this was still a 4-team playoff and yesterday would have knocked Ohio State completely out of the playoff, I think Ryan Day would have been fired today. But he's going to get a shot because of the 12-game playoff. He could actually go in there, beat Arizona State, have another shot at Oregon, possibly beat Oregon, and then after that, I think that could solidify his job because then he'd be in the Final Four and Ohio State played up to their potential. But I think Day's very lucky that it has moved to a 12-team playoff and Ohio State doesn't want to change their coaches while they have a chance of getting into a playoff and still win a championship. Now we have the 9 seed. So who's going to travel out to Athens and play the Georgia Bulldogs? I think this is pretty easy. They only have 1 loss. They've had a good season, and I think the committee will reward them no matter what their strength of schedule is, and that would be the Indiana Hoosiers would be your 10 seed heading out to play Georgia. And I don't care what you say about Indiana. I've been talking about my dogs. They can struggle sometimes, and Indiana has a pretty good defense. I actually think that would be a fun and interesting game, and that's who I have for the 7 and 10 game, Georgia and Indiana. Okay, the last 2 remaining spots for the 11th seed heading up to Happy Valley to play Penn State. And here it is. Everybody wants each way. So I have a Big Ten going to SEC. Now I have a SEC going to the Big Ten. And that would be Tennessee. The Volunteers I know they would fall in rankings because of how the conference championships proceed. And I would have the Volunteers going up to Penn State, which I think would still be a very good football game. And I'm not basing this on how I want the matchups to be. I'm basing this on how I think the conference championships will affect the college football playoff. But there you go. Tennessee going to Penn State in that 11 and 6 matchup. And a lot of people are going to look at that going, that wouldn't be so bad to go play SMU, even though I think SMU's a very good football team, and not be on the side of Oregon. Let the debate begin for the last spot in the college football playoff. And I have debated this so many times. Could they reward a three team or a three loss Clemson team, which if they lose to SMU, that would be their fourth loss? No, I think they're going to be too far down the rankings. Could they give Iowa State, who only has two losses, and then they get in, like I said earlier, awarding teams that made their conference championships? Or do they give it to like an Alabama who travels well? Because come on, we know this is part of this. So I think, based on what I said earlier, I think that Iowa State, since they have three losses too, and they were in their championship game, that they're going to show that making your championship game matters. I know a lot of people think South Carolina should be in there because they've been playing so well. I think they'd pick Bama over Ole Miss. And another reason is they've already shown to us that with Alabama and Ole Miss beating South Carolina wouldn't have a shot. I've debated about this. It was going to be Ohio State or Alabama, and I think they're going to reward teams that go to the conference championships. Iowa State only has two losses going into it, which means Iowa State will make the playoff even though they lost their conference championship. And I don't think Clemson can make it. UNLV's not ranked high enough because I think Iowa State will go into the week ranked higher than UNLV in Clemson as well. And I think they could get that 12th spot. So there is my college football playoff. A lot of fun first round games with Indiana and Georgia, Tennessee and Penn State, Iowa State and Indiana. Iowa State and Notre Dame, and then Arizona State and Ohio State, with all the chances of winning to get to the next set of teams and then possibly knocking them off. We would see, the only problem with this, and there's no way around some of these probably, if Georgia was to beat Indiana, they would be a rematch. The third time Georgia and Texas would play. And then if Georgia wins out and then Tennessee wins out, you'd have a rematch there. Or if Penn State could go in to beat SMU, whatnot. If Ohio State beats Arizona State, you're going to have a rematch there. And then on this other side with Iowa State and Notre Dame and Boise State, there would be no rematches there. So it's mostly on my side of the right bracket is where you would have all of those rematches, which is fine because most of those were very good football games. But there you have it. Now for the Heisman Trophy winner. Let's just get to it. It's Jeanty versus Hunter in my eyes. Those are the two. So we're going to look at their stats, and I'm going to start with Ashton Jeanty. He had 312 carries with 2,288 yards and 28 touchdowns. 18 receptions for another 102 yards and another touchdown. Currently, because he's got another game to play, he is fifth all-time rushing yards in a single season, which is very impressive. Now, he's going to play in the championship game for the Mountain West. If he gets 55 more yards, he's going to pass Marcus Allen for the fourth best. And then if they win that, then he'll get to play in the college football playoff. And then I think depends on how many yards he gets, but I think he's only 200 and something yards behind the next two. And then, of course, if he keeps playing, he has a very good shot of beating Barry Sanders' record. Let's look at the last Heisman winner for a running back, and that was Derrick Henry. Let's look at his stats. In 2015, he had 395 carries. Now, this includes all the games they played, including the championship. Anyway, he only had he had 2,219 yards with 28 touchdowns, 11 receptions for 91 yards, and then he had 0 receiving touchdowns. So if you look at Jeanty, even before he finishes the season this year, his stats looks better than the last running back to win a Heisman, which is extremely, extremely impressive. Moving on to Travis Hunter, let's take a look at his stats. So he has 92 receptions for 1,152 yards with 14 touchdowns. He also has 2 rushes for 5 yards and another touchdown. On the defensive side, he has 31 tackles, 11 pass defended, 1 forced fumble, 4 interceptions. And then the kicker, 620 snaps, 124 per game. I mean, we know he's an incredible athlete, but to prepare for both sides of the game, he is literally playing the whole game. He is having to understand defensive schemes, understanding does he need to be in man coverage? Is this a zone play? And not only that, he jumps right back on the other side and has to know every offensive play. Which route does he need to run? Does he need to block on this running play? Is he a decoy? Are you just running down the field and letting someone come across the middle? He's doing it all. It's it's so impressive. It's just tremendous what he is doing. So let's look at some of the stats of other Heisman winners. We'll start with the last wide receiver Heisman, and that was Devontae. He had 117 receptions, 1,856 yards with 23 touchdowns. Understand that he's not touching his yardage. He's close in receptions, and he's not touching his TDs, but that was a very high-powered offense. It's a little different. His carries, roughly the same, 4 carries, 6 yards with a touchdown. Then we look at Charles Woodson, who was considered a defensive back. Well, he was a defensive back. He's not considered. In 1997, his Heisman stats, he had 7 interceptions, which was 3 more. And then he had 3 rushes for 11 yards and a touchdown. And then he had 11 receptions for 231 yards in 2 touchdowns. Now, he wasn't being used on the offensive side like Travis is, but that just shows you how much work Travis is putting into. Woodson was only coming in on, like specialty type plays, which is still impressive. I don't want to discount what Woodson did either, or Devontae for that matter. But if you're looking at comparison, this is still pretty impressive. I couldn't find how many snaps Woodson had or how many tackles he had. I couldn't find that. But here nor there, you get the gist. So that leads me. Who is my Heisman winner? Let the drum rolls roll. It's this kid you see in the picture here. He's striking the Heisman pose. That is my pick, Travis Hunter. If you go back to week 5 of my videos, he was the odds of 3,000 at the time. I was actually making a point that, and at the time, Manning had 1,600, which was almost half of the odds that Hunter had. So if I would have even bet on my own self that he would win, you could win some money when they announce the Heisman winner if he wins. I will say I think it's going to be very, very close. I think this is going to be one of the tightest Heisman races. But for sure, I have Travis Hunter winning it. As always, thank you for listening to Spider Red. Watch a game with a friend. Later.